Okay, so we've got a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have someone here who's been in the music space for such a long time and had a great amount of impact, and now has taken her talents to really build something of her own and to have a lot of success as well in that category. It's not always easy to build something on your own, but then to succeed is a different thing. And I think there's a lot of innovation that has come out of your journey that I'd love to talk about too. So great to have you here.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Amazing. So I'd love to just talk a bit about first how you got interested in music and how the
Mm.
kind of more executive leadership side came about. Because some people aspire to be artists, maybe then they switch, or it's the other way around. Who knows? How did you get interested in music?
I was always a fan, like from day one. I don't play an instrument, but I loved music. And at the time, there wasn't as much knowledge, right, around music industry as there is right now. There's a lot of transparency and discussion and podcasts and um, there's all sorts of information. Back then, it was the music business and record labels in general were behind this like black curtain, right? You didn't really understand them, you know what I mean? So I remember when I discovered what a record label was, I knew because I was music director at a radio station, my college radio station, and I started getting these free records from Capitol. And I'm like, oh, okay, so someone does this, like this is how it works. And I ended up applying for a job to write press releases for then Polygram, which was a major that ended up being bought by Universal at the time. And Universal, okay, I'm really showing my age right now. Universal in 1998 was buying Polygram, and they weren't even a player at that time. So I was kind of there for that big first merger that
Mhm.
made Universal the number one company that still exists today. So it was all of that. So I started in the press department, then got a job in A&R, and then I found my love in project management. So
You've been on every side of this.
yeah, not every side, but some of them.
So how
you
did
know.
you get your first kind of like foot in the door? Was it just an application somewhere or connection?
Yeah, so I saw a notice for this job at Polygram. I go, oh, this is cool. I was the entertainment editor of the paper. I covered music. I was music director. I'm like going, oh, let's see what this is. And I got lucky because I had a part-time job at
Hmm.
this Italian delicatessen, and I knew the people who worked at Polygram who went there. So when she came down, Lynn Adelist, who hired me, when she came down the stairs, I go, oh, wow, I know you. And I remember thinking, oh my God, she has this Tears for Fears shirt and the Smiths. And I love this lady. Where does she get all that? So basically, I was a kind of a known entity, but for different reasons. And I had all my clips from journalism school. And I think I ended up getting the job because they asked me, okay, who's your favorite band? And I said, the Pixies. And then they just grilled me on all sorts of questions and I answered them all. So it was always as being a fan and knowing how to write. Those were the two things that got me in the door.
Knowing how to write. How did you learn how
Yeah.
to write?
I just always loved it. Like I minored in journalism. I didn't want to do the hard nosed journalism necessarily, but I loved editorial writing and it's just a passion of mine. And it's ending up coming full circle, right? In terms of social media and voice and all of those things. So I still apply everything I've learned. It's really funny that way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about like just the kind of just going up the ranks in the
Mm.
music space and earlier on? Like what was that like? You mentioned the different positions you were in. How difficult was it? Were people really open to you trying new things?
Such a great thing. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to I really didn't know a lot about, again, huge fan of music. And I wasn't like the person that says, I'm going to be president of Warner Brothers. That's like my dream. I'm going to do it. I was more in the day to day of loving what I did, like really loving it, like investing a lot of time, working really hard, knowing the product. I think is like the number one thing, for me. Being connected to the managers, the music, and all that stuff. Working hard. I'd
Mhm.
say that was, and people noticed. I was lucky enough to be at a company where, wow, that girl is really like killing it. So let's give her an opportunity. You know what I mean? I was blessed to be noticed and to be seen. at that time, because I really did not know what I was doing other than really understanding the music side of it. And of course, once you're in, you learn, right? Oh, what does that person do? That's the head of marketing. That's the head of A&R. Like, and you get to know the roles that way. Yeah.
What was it like at Warner Brothers Records at that time? Like, was it chaotic or was it kind of put together? And just like, I'd love to just hear more about that experience, like being involved leading it.
Okay, so oh yeah, so that's we're skipping a lot. So I grew up in Canada,
Yeah,
learning. I was doing press and promotion, and then I got an opportunity to go to New York, and this
mm,
was before Island Def Jam merged.
right.
So that's where I met Leor and Julie Greenwald, and I think that that's important because I learned a kind of leadership there that was coming from hip hop and
Uh,
coming from that urgency. And so I was always like an indie rock girl. And for me to be exposed to that type of marketing and to that kind of branding was really kind of exciting. And that's kind of the knowledge I took to go to Warner Brothers. This is after kind of an incredible year, 2008, where, I was instrumental in bringing the Twilight music franchise to, Atlantic at the time, and was pretty instrumental in some really big projects we had that year. So I got an opportunity to be president. And prior to that, I was kind of like, I watched my mentor, Julie Greenwald, be president. And it was really great to see a woman in that position and how she did it. So I never really knew I wanted that, other than I wanted to sort of have an impact. And to me, as you grow in the ranks, that's what having an impact means. And I was lucky enough to have like a symbol of that. So when Leor offered me the co-presidency of Warner Brothers, I was super excited. And I realized, being in it, like what was great about it
mm.
and also what was challenging about it. So the higher you go, the more political it all gets, right? And I have zero interest in that. So I realized right away that I'm not about managing that, and I'm more about working directly with talent. So in the 3 years that I did it, we had some amazing success. Like, we were able to launch the Michael Bublé TV, property at the time, and the Christmas album that still to this day people are, to be involved in a project that big was kind of cool. And then being able to develop a Gary Clark Jr. from the beginning, or Kimbra, or all of these developing acts. And then at the same time, like, Green Day and My Chemical Romance and some of the biggest like brands in the business, it was all pretty amazing. Like, getting to know like Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips and having a relationship with him, or even Neil Young. I mean, it was like, I remember when Michael Stipe called me, I'm like, oh, I cannot friggin' believe Michael Stipe is calling me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what? Like, where am I? So as a fan, it was probably the most incredible experience musically on all levels. But I think I really learned what I was meant to do, which is that one-on-one, really taking that pickaxe and breaking an act from day one. And I felt like we need an agency that thinks that way, that isn't about just marketing the singles, or, launching big projects. And obviously we do that at Black Box as well. But I felt like that being that kind of like special shop that like listens to your narrative, your brand, your story, tries to cultivate that from the beginning and really does that work. Uh, I felt like if I didn't have the Warner Brothers experience, I wouldn't know that's what I was meant to do,
Mhm.
So it was good. And it was also, okay, I think there's something else in this business for me. Yeah.
In terms of music marketing, like,
Yeah.
and obviously you've got TikTok, Instagram, big places for that. But like, what does it look like when rolling out these albums? And like, how do you figure out interesting marketing ideas? They've got to be super creative. There's tons of artists, tons of new releases that are happening. What goes into the marketing side of stuff?
Yeah, I think like what's so exciting about it is I think marketing is getting more and more creative. It used to be in the business that marketing was distribution. Like, how do you get it to radio? How do you get it to sales? Like, how do you get the Best Buy circular? Things like that were more about reaching like demographics and reaching people. Whereas now I think it's about psychographics. It's about really getting into, what is the subculture around the music. And like, I think a pivotal thing that's making music a lot more creative than it was is just the fact that genre as we knew it growing up is kind of gone. Like there used to be like 7 radio formats and a certain type of fan for each format. That's gone. Like now it's just all about what unites them beyond just the genre. You know what I mean? Like you could be a rock band on with a pop audience. What does that look like? When I was growing up, it was a little bit more tougher. So I think the whole thing has exploded and gotten so much more creative. So I think the big where it starts for me is always listening to the artist's story, their personal story, not necessarily what they tell gatekeepers and press, but kind of like who are they as people? Because I feel like if you can manage that on social media and develop this kind of authentic, very intimate relationship with your fans, I think you can really build a business. So that's the part that's exciting.
Is that a big focus for you now? Black Box is like making sure artists create engagement to build businesses.
Yes. Yes. And to do it authentically. A lot of people talk about that, everyone says authentic, you know what I mean? And we want that. It's very, very hard to build. Some artists are just amazing at being artists, you know what I mean? And it's a little tougher for them to be quote unquote salespeople.
Right.
So for me, the way I always approach things, again, my experience as a fan is always like, what would you want your fan to know about you? Like what would you say to them at the merch booth, at the end of a gig, you know what I mean? This is not about TikTok best practices or Instagram. This is about what would you say to them, like to connect with them. And I think that really gets an artist fired up. When you're like talking about best practices or TikTok says you should post 3 times a day or do Instagram reels, and it becomes this kind of soulless kind of recipe, social recipe, artists are less excited about that, but they're always excited with connecting with their fans and audience. So it's really about making it real for them. And I think if they're telling their story in an authentic way and being themselves, and we're helping them with certain strategies to do that, I think it becomes fun and it's something that they can do, versus just post 3 times a day.
Do most of them want to be entrepreneurial like this, or kind of just some of them do, and it's like there's some convincing needed?
Some love it and they're naturals, and others just want to play music and write music, and they struggle with this part of it. But I think that the when the wall comes down is like, how are you with your audience? I mean, some of them still want to maintain that mystery. Like when I look at Kendrick Lamar and his brand,
Mhm.
he's not necessarily Mr. He puts all of his effort in his visuals and his storytelling, but within that, there's a community, you know.
Mhm.
So I think like you could be the kind of artist you want to be. You just have to kind of have an awareness of like what are you trying to do culturally, what are you trying to do in terms of your community, how are you trying to connect with people who listen to your music. And I think if you have a really good knowledge of that, then the strategy kind of comes from that,
Mhm.
I think.
Do you spend any time now on like new artist discovery, and how do you find artists if you do?
Great question. I think as I'm getting older and like my discovery's coming from my 13-year-old, you know what I mean? Like, and I think most parents are like that. Like she showed me Billie Eilish in a way that I wasn't aware of her. Like
Mhm.
I knew the singles, right? But she went deep into album cuts and she was like, 9, 10 at the time. So because of her, I went through every single like album cut, and now I can say that I really know her, So I think and also things like I'm proud to say like she showed me Demon Hunters and didn't like it very much and like things like that. So there's a lot of like I learned from her and obviously from my clients and the people I work with. But I have to say it's a little harder. I'll
Yeah.
always go back and listen to 4AD records, I might.
I mean, how important would you say the social media world is today for artists when crafting new sounds? So, like, when you see all these trends, some of these trends explode on TikTok to specific sounds. Or, like,
Yeah.
is it now like, hey, make something similar to that? Or, like try to do something that people are gonna make a TikTok dance to, and like that's like a huge piece of the strategy, or is it just make something amazing and hope it happens?
I think it's about knowing that TikTok is a huge platform to reach people. and you can reach them directly. But it has to feel right, like aren't always right for everyone, but you could take a sound clip and do something really cool and interesting with it. We have an artist, Mary Jo, that has a track called Living Room. And literally that started to go viral with her just singing in the studio in a very impassioned way because there's a lot of passion behind her music, a lot of heartbreak. So she was just belting, belting in the car, belting in the studio. And there was nothing inauthentic about that. She wasn't trying to turn that into anything other than it was, which is a passionate moment. And it worked for her. So as we were like setting up our release, she was already going viral. So I really do think it's about content that works for you and trying a lot of different things, trial and error.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always going to be trial and error.
Yeah, exactly. Because, the thing that I always try to dissuade artists from believing is that, oh, that person's strategy isn't necessarily your strategy. Like we have a lot of artists that are just sometimes trying to crack the code and want to follow 10 million things. It's like, and that's good to try it.
Mm.
But I always like caution them, like what works for them that won't necessarily work for you. And it always boils down to who they are as people and what their strengths are as artists.
So in terms of just like building up the artist side of things at Black Box, like how did you start getting artists involved? Was it just personal relationships to begin? And like, what's it like now with, bringing in some of these new people? There's so many artists you could partner with. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually, because so the loneliest thing in the world is okay. I've opened up my store. Will anybody come? I think I had a lot of people that I knew from Warner Brothers, Atlantic, and who were curious what I was doing. Like I either worked with them, at the label level. So it started definitely like that because we had a lot of clients before we officially launched because I think it was really important for me to really know what I was going to do. And I made a very deliberate effort to kind of say, I want to be an agency. I don't want to think about royalties or like, because to me, the dead end of that system is kind of like you only focus on those artists eventually that are successful. And then the artists that take a little bit longer, kind of tend to fall by the wayside when you're like looking at streaming numbers. So I thought, you know what? I just want to be a hired gun. I want to work hard for anybody who hires us. And like, and I thought there was a tremendous amount of freedom in that model because it's all about doing a good job. And if you can help these artists, then you take them on as clients. And if there isn't a clarity on how to help them, you don't. So I kind of dug that, you know what I mean? It really kind of allowed me to exercise that marketing muscle. But at first it was relationships of people I worked with. And then we started to cultivate our own brand, by kind of showing the industry what we were about, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it was, tell your story, build your audience. Like we started to really lean into language that's really very commonplace now. But at the beginning, people kept saying, what the hell are these guys talking about? So they were curious. So we ended up getting like a lot of people reaching out to us, like a JP Sachs, who smart individual, creative, heard about us, you know what I mean? And we started to find our people. So we were kind of like an example of what we preach to our clients.
How different is Black Box from like the management side of things?
Well, on the management side, and it's a great question because we do a lot of things that managers do.
Right.
What me and Brian, our general manager, are experts at is just the label part of it because we kind of grew up at labels. Him at a bunch of indies, and I hired him at Warner Brothers, and then we started this together. So we both have experience at indie labels and major labels. So for us, we really bring that knowledge, which is really specific. And on the management side, we've learned as we go along, like what could we, how could we help you? And we just dive in and we know agents and we know the industry. So we just kind of get to work that way. So I would say that, and I wouldn't say label services because a lot of people use that term and it usually refers to distribution services and things like that. We're more of an integrated like marketing company. We kind of look at artist development, we look at label rollouts, and we work with a lot of distributors and a lot of major labels too. We're just like a dedicated focus on like music marketing.
Just a different question, very
Sure.
different topic. Like
Yeah, please.
everybody talks about Spotify in the industry and like, the
Yeah.
earnings that can come from that. Um, what are your thoughts on just the way that those kind of numbers are for artists? And do you see anything kind of changing with the kind of typical business model of today for artists to earn from streaming in general?
Streaming is a tough nut to crack when you're an independent artist, you know what I mean? And I think unless you have a hit record with a giant feature and stuff like that, or you're able to be pushed everywhere, you know what I mean? It's hard to make a living off of streaming unless you're really consistent. I think consistency is key. Like if, we have an artist that we've been partnered with for the last 3 years. Her name is Maris, and we've been consistently releasing music every 6 to 8 weeks, and her agent has been working very hard getting her on tours, and we've been grinding it to the point where now she's starting to recoup some of it. Do you know what I mean? But that's
Yeah.
like a 3-year process. So I think it takes an incredible long time, and I believe that it's tough. It's tough now. Like you're either showing signs of life pretty quickly, or it's really hard to kind of like get to that next step, which is why I feel that what I'm doing at Black Box is really needed, because I always felt that cream would rise, like that,
Mm,
our industry wouldn't miss anyone that's super talented. But I think right now we're at a point in the industry that we are missing a lot of
mm,
talented people. Do you know what I mean? And they
yeah.
do need that 0 to 10 development. And they're
They
not
need
going to
it
get that
bad.
at labels. Yeah. Like when you look at a Chapel Roan, that was a 7 year process, and she was dropped by her first label, you know what I mean? And re-signed. Like you risk that, today.
Just the last question I have, like, what are your biggest goals right now? What are your biggest focuses?
That's a good question. I want to keep doing better by artists. You know what I mean? Like in our deck, we have a case study of everything we've done, with each client we've had. To me, it's like making that nice and big and thick and like, really helping as many people as possible that come through our doors. I think it's just keep doing what we're doing, but do it better.
Awesome. Well, I think what you've done already is fascinating, and Black Box serves a really interesting role in the space. There's a lot of artists that need different kind of help than what they get at the typical labels, and they need an understanding of good marketing and how to build out really exciting campaigns. And there's a lot you do for them that they need. So I'm excited to see it all grow and the next phase of it all. And thanks for coming on and doing this.
Thanks, Ben.